Hi, everybody out there in virtual land. It's going to take us just a couple of minutes to get everyone connected. So just give us a second while everybody enters the webinar, and then we'll get started. I think we'll give it about 30 more seconds to see if we can get some more people who signed up logged on before we get officially started. Christine, I think I'll go ahead and get started. Well, happy Monday evening to everybody and welcome. My name is Heather Lunt and I'm a parent volunteer involved with the AAA program since its inception, actually about 10 years ago. And we're so happy that you chose to be here with us tonight. This is AAA's second parent support webinar this year. AAA, if you may or may not be familiar with us, but we're also known as the Awareness, Acceptance, and Advocacy for Mental Wellness. And it's a parent volunteer, administration, and school counselor, social worker collaboration. We all work together to identify and educate on all the important topics that are relevant to our students and our families and our community. We appreciate the support of the Forest Hills Foundation in bringing events such as tonight to you. Tonight, we have a topic that can be sensitive and often overlooked: teen dating and safe relationships, as well as the very real issue of local human trafficking. Christine Yelding is our Forest Hills Social, Emotional Learning and Systems Administrator, and she also works with all of the mental health professionals in the district, is going to take it from here and give us the details and nuts and bolts on how the webinar will work tonight. Thanks, Christine.
Thank you so much, Heather. During our program tonight, each panelist will share more about the organization that they work with, as well as additional resources. With us, we have Megan Opperly from Kent ISD's Human Trafficking, Katie Papke from Life Support LLC, Nakidra DeBarge from Wedgwood Manasseh Project, and Scott Troyer from Safe Haven Ministries. At any point during the webinar, please feel free to add questions or comments in the Q&A function located at the bottom of your screen. We'll be monitoring these throughout. All questions will remain anonymous. We'll be responding to these during our Q&A portion at the end. During the webinar, we will also be polling the audience, and we ask that you participate in these polls. And before we begin officially, we're going to try one. So the first poll for tonight is, what is your favorite hot beverage? And we ask that you pick one. Coffee, black, because that's the only way that you should drink it. A little coffee and a lot of creamer. Hot chocolate, hot tea, hot chai, or hot apple cider when they're coming in. All right, and we are going to close the poll in 3, 2, and 1. And I feel really good in this group because you guys are a lot like me and you like coffee, but only if it's mostly creamer. That's me, totally. So thank you so much for participating. We will be doing those throughout the night. So thanks for doing that tech check with us. Starting us off tonight is Katie Papke, who is a survivor leader with human trafficking, a graduate from Forest Hills Central, and a Forest Hills Public School parent.
Thank you, Christine. Thanks for having us. So just a little bit of a warning about the content that we're sharing today. We'll be talking about relationship abuse, sexual violence, and human trafficking. If you need to take a break to care for yourself, please feel free to do so at any time. If you need support, please feel free to contact any of the presenters here today with the information and contact that we had already listed and shared, or connect with other local resources listed at the conclusion of our event. So again, my name is Katie Papke. I graduated from Forest Hills Central in 2001. And I am every parent's worst nightmare if they send their kids to college out of state. That's kind of a warning, but it's just so happy to be talking about this topic today from a prevention standpoint and what we can do. So I was unfortunately a kid who was very rebellious. I grew up with very supportive parents. I went to Pine Ridge Elementary, Central Middle School, and Forest Hills Central High School. And I would love to say that there are multiple risk factors related to human trafficking, but it is not unique to everybody. They are not a subset of prescriptive risk factors that say, yep, Katie had this, 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 and this, and that's what led to her trafficking and vulnerability. Some things that I can say that led to the trafficking were a series of low self-esteem, eating disorders, very sexualized, interested in dating older guys. I remember between my 8th grade and 9th grade year, I was dating a senior from a different school, partying, rebelling, and kind of really just kind of wanted to stay by myself in isolation later on within the high school. Lots of wardrobe changes related to more revealing clothing, sneaking out, and involved in legal activities. So that was in high school. Fast forward to going to college out of state in Florida. I was there by myself, lonely. I found a few friends and was introduced to a guy who was older, way older than me. And of course, with my attraction to older men, I was vulnerable to being exploited. And that is what happened. I was coerced and forced to engage in sexual exploitative activities with the threat of being revealed by having information sent to my parents, with exploitive remarks to my college that I was going to. And this is what kept me stuck in the cycle of human trafficking for 2 years. Eventually, my parents found out and came and brought me back to Michigan. And then the healing and aftercare started. This is trauma, and that can be happening at any level, at any time. It can happen to anyone. So that's why we're talking about it today. Next, we're going to hear from Scott from Safe Haven to talk about understanding relationship abuse and how to support teens. Thanks for joining us today.
Hello, everybody. I am Scott with Safe Haven Ministries. I am the Youth Violence Prevention Coordinator there. So I work with schools and youth to create environments that help protect against violence generally, as well as focusing specifically on relationship abuse. I wanted to start by giving everybody a little bit of an idea of what all Safe Haven does for folks. So these are our direct services. We serve survivors of relationship abuse and human trafficking. There are a number of ways that we do that. There are support groups that meet regularly for both adults and for children whose parents have experienced relationship abuse, as well as friends and family. We offer advocacy and crisis support. That's primarily done through our hotline or through walk-in visits or appointments. We offer emergency safe shelter for anyone experiencing relationship abuse or human trafficking that rises to the level where it is a significant threat to the person's life. We have children's programming, such as the support groups for children whose parents have been victims of domestic violence. All of our supports are offered in Spanish. We have bilingual Spanish-speaking advocates, and we are also able to get translation services for any language. And we also are moving into a time of mobile advocacy. We have just added a mobile advocate position who will be able to go out into the community and meet people at places like neighborhood associations, McDonald's, the library, wherever is safest for them, because we know that our building is not always the most accessible for people. So that those are some of the services that we offer. Tonight we're talking about teen dating violence. Relationship abuse is not something that just happens in adulthood. It is something that teens experience as well. It's actually very, very common for teens to experience it. About 1 in 3 teens experience relationship abuse in their relationships. And it takes a wide variety of formats. So for some folks, it's very common to think about relationship abuse or domestic violence being something that's just happening between adults or just between people in certain kinds of relationships, but it really happens to all kinds of people, all ages. Teen dating violence in particular can look a little bit different and be a little bit more specialized. And we'll go through that in a moment and all the ways that that can look. I wanted to provide some definitions here before we continue on. So teen dating violence is a pattern of learned behaviors that one person uses to control another in a relationship. Teen dating violence, intimate partner violence, domestic violence, all of these are learned behaviors that a person chooses to engage in. Sexual assault is often also related to dating violence or domestic violence, although not always. And we explicitly define sexual assault as any sexual contact or any behavior that occurs without the consent of the victim. It also does not have to be only sexual in nature. Sexual assault, sexual harassment can also happen when the behavior and the violence is based on a person's gender. So how do people, perpetrators, how do they do this sort of violence? How do they exert this control over another person? Well, we have this tool here, and a version of this will be sent out after the webinar that has some detailed examples of all of these elements. Abuse is not just physical abuse. That is just one wedge in this much larger arena of power and control. So we do see physical abuse and sexual abuse on the wheel. We also see emotional and psychological abuse. Those can look like denying feelings, using guilt, blaming others for everything, not taking responsibility for one's own actions, playing mind games, making threats to harm themselves, harm someone else, threatening suicide, also causing harm to pets as well. There's also financial abuse, which includes limiting access to income or limiting someone's ability to get to a job. In a teen relationship, we might see this more in that arena where somehow the person who's committing abuse is preventing someone from getting to their car, stalking them at work, things like that. Social abuse is also something very common to see in teen dating violence. Isolating someone from their friends, from their family, insisting that they're the only person that you can hang out with, and making them feel special, and like nobody else quite understands them, and sort of driving that wedge between a person and their friends and family. Technological abuse is the final element that is particularly common, and it's something that is just very, very, very common in teen relationships. On the next slide, there we go. We have it broken down in a little bit more detail. Some of the things to watch out for specifically for technological abuse is when a partner or a friend or somebody that your teen is talking with is demanding passwords to their social media accounts, or demanding that they be able to get into their phone. And sometimes it doesn't look like, the demanding. It looks like saying, hey, like, can you let me into your phone? Like, this would just be easier if you let me in your phone. Just give me your passcode. This would just be easier if I can just get into your account. Oh, don't you trust me? Right? It doesn't always look like those threats. Sometimes it looks like this more subtle coercion. Public humiliation, cyber harassment, and cyberbullying are also very common. There are also a lot of there's a lot of cyberbullying that happens even outside of romantic relationships that can exacerbate the issues faced by somebody who's experiencing teen dating violence. Posting photos on the internet without someone's permission. They don't have to be nude photos. It doesn't have to be sexting, right? It can be anything that causes shame and embarrassment posted without permission, or anything that makes it feel like they've lost control over how they're presented in public. Like there's nothing they can do to prevent someone else from just posting on the internet anything they want. Being in control of who someone's allowed to follow, asking why they're DMing, direct messaging somebody else on one of their social media platforms, Instagram, TikTok, Snapchat, or saying like, hey, like you can't follow them, or we can't be together if you're gonna follow these people or interact with these people, or this is a very insidious one, telling them they must answer a call or a text or a snap message when it's sent. Sometimes this can look like just a lot of care, right? We want someone in a relationship who is going to want to talk to us, want to be around us, want to stay, want to communicate with us. But when it's every single time, when it's all day long, when it's every 3 minutes, when as soon as you post something on social media, the person you're in a relationship with comments immediately, right? That is letting the teen know, letting the victim know that there is nothing you can do that I don't see, and I see it right away. You are never going to be out of my sight. So it can happen to anyone. That does not make you a bad parent. It doesn't make you a bad guardian, a bad caregiver. It is not a reflection of your character or your ability to raise your children. It's important to note that when it does happen, they need your support. Your teen needs your support. You need to center the teen's experience when you're talking to them, not your own. They've gone through a lot. They're trying to process a lot. If you need help to process, you can call Safe Haven as well, or the YWCA as local resources, and they can help you process that and help you figure out what to do, or talk to counselors or other parents. But when you're interacting with your teen, their experience is what matters, and you're supposed to be there for them. So what does that look like? It looks like ABS. Ask, believe, support. So the first piece of that is ask. When you notice something that's going on, when you notice one of the behaviors I mentioned above, you've noticed that someone your teen is hanging out with or seeing is sort of denying how they feel, or it feels like they're just always around, and never go anywhere else. Or you notice that they can just like get into your teen's phone whenever they want to, right? Ask what's going on. Be gentle and honest about your concern. Don't hide it. Don't hide what you're trying to say, but also don't be accusatory. Like, this looks like this person is being abusive. I think you should stop. That's not gonna go very far. But if you say, hey, I noticed that this person that you're hanging out with can get into your phone whenever they want, and it concerns me a little bit. Can we talk about, what this is like for you? Can we talk about safety around who can get into your phone? Right. Give them choice as to whether or not they answer. I'm sure we're all familiar with teens. They don't always want to talk right away. And that is okay. You asked, and if they want to respond to you, they certainly can. And if they want to respond at a later date, they might not say, let me get back to you next Tuesday. They might say, no, I don't want to talk about it. And then you can say something like, okay, I just wanted you to know that I'm always here to talk to you if you ever need me to. And then that puts the power and control that was taken by their abuser, it takes that and puts it back in their hands. They are able to have choice, have some agency over their life again, and choose when and how they talk about what they're experiencing. And they are the expert of their own experience. There's nobody who knows better than them what is happening. The next thing to do is to believe. It is very important to believe survivors. A lot of times, survivors of domestic abuse are not believed. We've heard all the time, it wasn't that bad. Or, are you sure he meant it that way? Are you sure she wasn't just teasing you? Are you sure she doesn't just like you? That's very hard for them to hear, and it sends the message that they can't trust themselves, right? And it's the same message their abuser is giving them too, saying like, I'm not abusing you, right? They're gaslighting them. They're telling them that this is normal, right? Part of believing is practicing active listening. Pay attention to your body language. Are you leaned in? Are you back, right? Are you reflecting back what they're saying? Are you paraphrasing what they're saying? Are you following up with them, asking follow-up questions so you better understand what's going on? And the other part of believing is accepting it. Don't say, why are you still in this relationship with them? Don't say, why did you let this happen, right? Don't press for details like a detective. Just accept what they tell you in that moment and ask for clarification. And when they say, I don't want to talk about that, same as before, reiterate, I'm always here to talk if you want to. It's okay if you don't want to do that right now. And the last element of this is support. When you're supporting someone, you are acknowledging and validating their experience, right? It is perfectly, sometimes a survivor needs to hear, it is okay to feel lots of feelings. It is okay to be both sad and to feel like you don't want this person, you don't want to hurt this person, right? Because there are someone that you had a connection with at some point, right? So it's normal to have those mixed feelings. It's important not to judge in your support. Don't should on them. Don't say you should have done this, you should have done that. That can really shut someone down and make them not want to share anymore because they feel like you're judging them, or they feel like it's their fault what happened to them because they should have done something else. Allow them to make their own decisions. You're not always going to agree with it, but their abuser has taken power and control away from them. So we're trying to empower the person to take that back and make their own decisions about when and how they seek help or get out of their relationship. And lastly, offer resources and other support. There's some resources at the end of our presentation, as well as at the schools. There's plenty of resources around. Love is Respect is a great website that goes through a lot of healthy relationships information as well. That's there for you. And the last thing I want to talk about is safety planning. So a safety plan is a personalized plan that includes ways to remain safe when you're in a relationship, planning to leave, or after somebody leaves. It includes emotions, telling friends and family about what's happening, legal action, anything you can think of. Love is Respect does have a great safety planning guide. And if you call Safe Haven or the YWCA or other resources, they can help you with safety planning as well. If you want to call with your teen, if they want you to call with them, that's something. Some general things to think about if your teen says, I need to know what to do right now. Some suggestions might be doing public breakups, letting people know where you're going to be at certain times so that if you don't show up, if you're late, they know something's wrong and they know to check. Creating a plan for what to happen if things go wrong, if you're with this person and they you notice a situation is headed in a direction that usually leads to some sort of physical violence. What can you do in that moment to diffuse that situation? Do you change the subject, right? Do you call a friend? Do you have a particular phrase that calms somebody down? That sort of thing. So open communication with your teen is the key to this, and making sure that that stays open. Again, teens don't necessarily always want to talk to us right away. They sometimes want to do things in their own time as they're figuring stuff out, and that's okay. Letting them know that the door is open, that the conversation won't be judgmental, that they're going to be supported is the key to making sure that your teen is supported through what they're experiencing. Open communication is also a significant part of human trafficking prevention. And so now we're going to transition to Nikidra to talk about human trafficking.
Good evening. My name is Nikidra DeBarge, and I am the project coordinator for the Manasseh Project at Wedgwood Christian Services. Wedgwood is, or the Manasseh Project is an outreach of Wedgwood Christian Services. We provide so we have a trauma recovery center for young women who have been trafficked or are at high risk for being trafficked, and someone identified them as someone who needed services. Then my job as the coordinator is to work into the community, doing advocacy, education, and awareness. And so I know you're going to probably feel like you're taking a drink out of a fire hydrant with all the information from today. Just suggesting that you pay attention to the themes because a lot of these intersect, especially when you're talking about dating violence. So we're going to start off with myths and facts, and just to kind of get you prepared for the conversation, we're going to ask you to fill out a poll with 3 questions on them, 3 individual poll questions. The first one is, human trafficking always involves kidnapping. Myth or fact? Absolutely, good job. Human trafficking does not always involve kidnapping. Actually, less of what we know of trafficking does happen in a kidnapping situation. Most often, it is by someone that they are familiar with, have developed a relationship with, or it could be. I won't say the next one. The next one is, people can be trafficked by family members, loved ones, or friends. Absolutely, it's fact that that was the other addition I was going to add is that over half of those trafficking cases have been found to be through familial activity, so familial engagement. So it's important for people to recognize that it's not always a stranger. It could be someone that they're very close to or that they know of. The last one, only women and girls can be victims of sex trafficking. That's 100% a myth. Absolutely. Young men and men, boys and men are also um, can be at risk for human trafficking as well, and especially in the LGBTQ population, where a lot of people are not saying, those are the reasons why they've been kicked out of their homes or don't have a place to stay, don't have those supportive factors, and so makes it allows for them to be even more vulnerable than they may have been before. Great job, everyone. So we're going to move forward. So human trafficking is the umbrella conversation. So it's a crime involving the exploitation of someone for the purpose of compelled labor or commercial sex act through the use of force, fraud, or coercion. And we'll kind of break that down as well. There are two types of human trafficking, one being labor trafficking. We don't hear a lot about labor trafficking as much as we do about sex trafficking. Labor trafficking is also a form of modern day slavery where individuals are compelled to perform labor or services through the use of force, fraud, or coercion, and can include situations of debt bondage. So you may have a situation where you have an individual who was told that they were going to get um, receive money for or going to be able to get an education, and they are brought back maybe from another country. It doesn't always have to be another country, but a lot of times this is what you hear. They're brought in from another country, told that they're going to get the life that they deserve, that they're going to be able to help their families, and then they find out that they're not going to do that at all. They're actually held, held responsible for any debt that was incurred during the travel, whether it was gas or food to eat or um, hotel expenses, whatever that is, and it becomes an astronomical amount of money that they cannot afford. And then eventually it becomes a situation where now they're in debt bondage, and unless someone knows the situation and has identified them as a trafficking victim, they're typically in that situation until someone helps them to get out. So, okay, we can go to the next slide. So sex trafficking is the other piece to human trafficking, is the recruitment, harboring, transportation, provision, or obtaining of a person for the purpose of commercial sex act, in which a commercial sex act is induced by force, fraud, or coercion. So if, for example, when you hear about force, that's where someone will be kidnapped or taken advantage of when they're physically forced into the industry, or through psychological manipulation as well. Fraud could be there, like I said, gave the example for labor trafficking. They're told that they're going to be brought to another country or to the States to be able to have a better life, and find out that that's not the case. Or coercion, where they're told, if you don't do this, like Katie kind of explained, if you don't do this certain thing, then I'm going to hurt your family, or I'm going to hurt you. So a lot of those things are what's being used to keep that person in fear and keep them in a situation that they don't feel like they can get out of. And it includes buying and selling of that person. I always also give an example of, if you have a young person who was kicked out of their home for whatever reason, and they get to a person's house and they ask if they can stay there after doing some couch surfing, and they find out that that person will allow them to stay there if they have some type of sexual act performed for their friends or someone that they know, and that person who's allowing them to stay gets paid for that. That will be commercial sexual exploitation or human trafficking. So just to kind of give you an example of that. couple things for you guys to watch for. First of all, that understand that these risk factors don't necessarily mean that your child is going to be trafficked, but it may be an indicator that something is not right. So paying attention to some of these red flags. I will go back and say um, the power and control wheel that Scott put on that he had in his presentation. The theme in this is that power and control is foundational for human trafficking. So when a person feels like they have power over that person, or they can get power from that person through their vulnerability, that's typically what they're going to target. So what you may notice are changes in behavior, like unusual absences from school, running away from home, frequent travel or other cities. So they're going in and out of cities. Um, Withdrawn behavior, so they're not acting the way they normally would act. And typically, you would know these things after spending time with the individual, whether it's a student or it's your own child. You know your child, and so once you start seeing some of these abnormal behaviors, maybe it's not one thing, because teenagers are going through a lot of emotional challenges. Chemical challenges and different things like that during the adolescent stages of their lives. So it may not be one thing. You might notice that they have an attitude one day, and then the other day they may be a little more paranoid, or they're keeping late hours, so they're breaking their curfew. So you start to see multiple things that make you question what's going on with my child. Anxiety or depression, tension or nervousness. You also may see changes in lifestyle, like suddenly have unexplained expensive clothes, gifts, access to money. So what I tell my children, or I tell people when I'm presenting, and tell parents all the time, if you didn't buy it, they don't have a job to afford it, then you should be asking questions as to how they receive these things. Dressed inappropriately for the surroundings or weather, branding by tattoo or burns or cuts indicating ownership. Typically in our program, we may see a lot of different tattoos. Um, we have had a young lady who came into our program, and she did have tattoos on her arms. And she said the reason why she had those tattoos was because every time she would recruit someone new, she would be able to the trafficker will give her a star. So he was basically empowering her to recruit other people. And when we talk about recruitment, that doesn't necessarily mean that it could be a youth recruiting another youth. It could be a lady that is utilized because she's a mama bear, and it's easier for her to make someone feel comfortable and feel loved and protected. So a lot of times the recruiter does not necessarily look like the trafficker, or is not the trafficker. And I shouldn't say look like, because there's no specific look to a trafficker. But some of the lifestyle changes suddenly have, cause text to unknown numbers, risky photos on social media, hotel room keys, especially if they're not of age, fake IDs or no IDs, new friends that you haven't been introduced to, much older or controlling boyfriend or girlfriend, and may even have gang affiliation. Recruitment. So kind of going back to what I was talking about, recruitment, there's a couple different ways in which that happens as well. So we have the grooming technique, where they're controlling their victims through psychological manipulation. They may work with family members to get them to be comfortable with them, so they can say, this is a good person, this is your uncle, or this is a family friend that's been around for years. You can trust them. And so they convince the families that the victim can trust them, or the families can trust them. They may present themselves as a boyfriend or a girlfriend, and they may shower them with affection, gifts, and promises of love and money. Typically, these traffickers they understand that if they are to engage with this person, if they can get them to say, yes, I want to be a part of this, or I want to be in a relationship with you, it's easier for them to take advantage of that person than it is for them to snatch them or kidnap them, because it's almost as if they're giving their consent, even if they don't understand what they are giving. That's an easier way for a trafficker to target someone or get them to do what it is that they want them to do. Power and control. So that's more of the forcing, controlling their victims through physical violence and force, threats of death, against family, loved ones, or friends. That's more of the kidnapping and forcing that person into the industry, using their age as a way that to be told that they can be trusted and that they're an adult and that they need to be respected. And so I always tell people, when it comes to that using age or that familiar attitude, that they should be respectful to that person. If your child is uncomfortable with the relationship, or if they're uncomfortable, they don't want to hug that person, they don't want to sit on that person's lap, whatever that may look like, then you have to respect that your child's boundaries and not be ashamed. We can typically, as parents, be ashamed of the response of our kids, and that's I believe it's pretty normal. But if it's not because they're not being disrespectful, but it's because they're uncomfortable, we have to validate that for them so that they do have that power to say, no, I'm not comfortable with sitting on that person's lap, or I'm not comfortable with going with that person, whatever the case may be. I think a lot of times, because we assume that a trafficker is a stranger, and because we assume that a trafficker is not someone that could potentially be in the family, or we think that we know what a trafficker looks like, a lot of times we will allow certain things just because we think that it's comfortable, because it's something that's more normal for us. But in reality, it could be abnormal situation. So pay attention to the responses of your youth. Some risk factors for exploitation. So these are some of the things that the youth may have experienced, that creates more of a vulnerability for them, like having previous sexual abuse. 85 to 90% of those who are trafficked have been sexually abused. And in our program at the Manasseh Project, 100% of those young women who come into our program have been sexually abused. Runaway, throwaway, or homeless youth. I don't typically like to use the term throwaway, but that's exactly what is happening, where you have families, kicking the kids out, or because they don't like their lifestyle, or something that they were tired of dealing with their behaviors. I understand as a parent that we do get frustrated, but we also have to understand that if we are kicking our children out, or not giving them the supporting their protective needs, then we're pushing them out in the street to be exposed to things like exploitation. Poverty and other unmet needs. We typically think about financial poverty, but you could have all your financial resources lined up. Things could be okay for you financially, but emotionally you may be impoverished. And so that's a doorway as well, for a trafficker to see that, you're looking for, money. You're looking to look a certain way. You're looking to connect with different peoples. And a lot of times, that's being told because a lot of our youth put things on all their information on social media. So there are things that they are experiencing. A lot of times they share it. And so then traffickers are able to watch these things and see what areas that they can tap into. LGBTQIA, having low self-esteem. We talk about the average age of entry being anywhere between 14 and 16, and that's the average age. During that time, you have your chemicals are changing in your body. You're going through different situations. And a lot of times that's the time where you're trying to figure out where you fit in. You're trying to figure out who you are and what you like and what you don't like. And a lot of times you're not getting along with your parents as much during this time. And so you are really vulnerable. And traffickers know that. Traffickers study individuals, and they know what type of things that they could potentially be going through, and sometimes where they're vulnerable. Mental health and other disabilities. It could be the parent that's suffering from a mental health disability, or the youth, and the trafficker may target that parent or their youth, or that youth, because they know that they have some mental health concerns. Being in foster care or other systems, a lot of times when you're in foster care, you can go from home to home. You can feel unloved. You can feel like no one wants you. There's so many different things that a foster care youth goes through emotionally and psychologically, where um, if someone would just pay attention to me, if someone would just show me that they love me and that they care about me, if someone would just give me a stable place to stay. So those might be some of the feelings that person may have. And then you have someone like a trafficker who knows this type of thing, and then that's what they target. Media influence is huge. We know that with the media, they are being bombarded with millions of messages from the time they wake up to the time they go to bed. And typically, what we're seeing more of is things being over sexualized. And so what happens is, this is what goes in. This is the garbage that goes in, and then the garbage that comes out may be how you respond to certain things. Your inhibitions are, you don't feel like the things that you say are important, or that carry weight. You don't feel like um, you're not sure when someone is addressing you with an inappropriate comment, because these things seem normal, because this is what you're seeing and this is what you're hearing on a regular basis. So media influence, I get on a soapbox about media influence. I'm not tonight. But I definitely think that we have to be careful about the things that our kids are taking in, because it's going to come out in some way or another. And I think we focusing on how they're going to listen to certain things, they're going to watch certain movies, but having a conversation with them about their values, and how important it is to keep themselves safe, and how the difference between what's on TV and what's on in music versus what's actually reality. Those are conversations that I suggest parents have with their youth around media. Lack of supervision. We have parents who are working, or parents who just can't be there 24/7, especially during like the pandemic, where a lot of kids were home. The parents were going to school, so they are being supervised by their iPads and their cell phones and that type of thing. And so a lot of things can transpire with with not having supervision. So what can you do as a parent or caregiver? And Scott did a good job of talking about some of the things that parents can do. But a couple more things: be a safe place for your youth to talk about their issues and concerns. Um, if they feel like they can't talk to you, they're not. If they feel, and a lot of times I tell people, if you can't be that safe space, if you can't be that person that they can come and talk to, then find someone else that can have that conversation with them. Because just because you're not having it, or talking about sex, or talking about human trafficking, or any of these other teen dating violence, just because you're not having the conversation doesn't mean that they aren't vulnerable to it, or that it can't happen to them. So making sure that you're letting them know that the things that they tell you, they're not going to get in trouble for, that they can trust you, and and not that you won't be honest about, or continue to be the parent, but that there are some things that there are things that they can just come and talk to you about, and that they won't get in trouble for, and that talk early and often about tough decisions that they may face, especially teenagers. They're going to face a lot of different things. So having that conversation with them about some of the potential things that they might come across. Supervise social media usage and create boundaries around usage. I always say kids like boundaries. They know that makes them feel safe. It makes them feel like they are cared for. And a lot of times it's us thinking that they don't want those boundaries, and so we don't give them to them. But youth would usually like. They may not say that they like them. They're probably never going to say that they like boundaries. But it does give them a sense of safety. Get to know their friends. so that you can know, like, if they come in with somebody that's different or weird, or they've gone out with someone, you know, you've had access to the friendships, and you kind of know who they're hanging around. If you're, like I said, if you're struggling to connect, look for a mentor or other trusted adult. Set boundaries and expectations. Talk to your youth about warning signs that you may observe. If you notice that they are a little more paranoid, or you notice that they are starting to have some behavioral changes, or they're isolating themselves, or not talking to the friends that they used to talk to, ask questions. Talk to them about what may have changed. And talk to them about their media usage. Create opportunities to let them know that you love and care for them, and that you believe in them, so that they don't think that they have to go other places to receive that love and relationship that they will naturally yearn for. We all yearn for positive relationships, and we want to be cared for. We want to feel loved, and so it is our job as parents and caregivers to provide that, so that they don't have to go somewhere else and be taken advantage of. So hopefully this information was helpful for you. And Megan will kind of talk a little bit more about what are some of the things that we are trying to do to be protective, to protect our youth.
Awesome. Thank you, Nikidra. So we just wanted to finish up our time tonight sharing with you some things that are happening in the community. Obviously, we know these issues exist, and like Scott and Nikidra talked about, all our young people are vulnerable, and as adults within their lives, whether we're parents or neighbors or within all of our roles, we have opportunities to influence them in really positive ways. And so we also have programs and resources. We have a wonderful community that has just some great resources around these issues, and wanted to make sure to share some of those with you. Those are all listed here on this slide. The Young Leaders Against Violence is your safe haven, and Scott will share more about that. Nikidra just shared about Wedgwood's Manasseh project. But I wanted to share specifically a little bit more about the human trafficking youth prevention education that is happening right now in Kent County. So my name is Megan Opperly. I work with Kent ISD, and I am the grant coordinator. The ISD was awarded in October 2020, which is a wild time to get a huge grant. We are awarded a grant, a 3-year grant through the federal government, through the Office of Trafficking in Persons, to be a demonstration site for human trafficking youth prevention education. And so the exciting part about that is we are one of only 8 communities in the entire country. So Kent County is among only 8 others in the country doing this work. And it's an emerging field and a great opportunity for us to really demonstrate and explore what does it look like to integrate human trafficking prevention work within the school context. So this work has begun in 3 pilot districts. Those 3 pilot districts are Godfrey-Lee, East Grand Rapids, and then My School at Kent, which is an online blended learning program through the ISD, with the intention of getting implementation throughout all of Kent County within the cycle of the grant. But that work includes train the trainers with coaching support, so that schools are able to sustain this work beyond the life of the grant. And there's really 3 components to this work. One is a staff education. So we want to make sure that our staff are equipped with how to prevent human trafficking and how to notice risk factors and warning signs. And if somebody is or may be experiencing human trafficking, that they're able to get the correct support they need by using a human trafficking school safety protocol. So we've developed and we'll be tweaking as we get better at it, a protocol that allows our young people to get support and to heal. And then the other part is we also know that adolescents in particular, I forgot to mention, this is for middle schoolers and high schools. Adolescents in particular are probably more likely to talk to their friends before a trusted adult. And so we want to make sure that we are equipping them with the same age-appropriate information on what do healthy relationships look like to avoid exploitation. So talking about consent and then talking about just building some protective factors against exploitation. So it is all a prevention model with age-appropriate materials implemented in the middle school and high school. So we're really excited about that. I think it certainly does take a village, and schools carry a large piece of that in terms of helping to support and educate our young people and our staff on this issue. And really the hope is to prevent it and to keep all our kids healthy and learning. I will pass it over to Scott, and he's going to share a little bit more specifically about what some of their programming and opportunities for your young people with Safe Haven.
Yes, thank you so much, Megan. Yeah, so I wanted to highlight what our Young Leaders Against Violence group is doing. Young Leaders Against Violence is made up of high school students from all over Kent County. We're meeting right now on Zoom because of the state of the pandemic. They get together specifically to address the issue of violence and pursue prevention initiatives. They've done a lot of things in the past, like writing letters to schools and encouraging schools to improve their response to sexual harassment. And this year we're running with, during February, which is Teen Dating Violence Awareness Month, they decided to host a panel event. They wanted to talk to parents and guardians and teachers and peers about what teen dating violence looks like, how you recognize it. So a lot of the same information that we talked about earlier as well, and what you can do to support teens who are experiencing teen dating violence. This is really fantastic because it is all the youth's idea. It's all youth led. And it's an event where you can hear directly from teens from across the county on what they think it takes to help support them. So the event will be February 23rd at 6 p.m. You can register with the QR code, and it's all over our Safe Havens Facebook and Instagram as well.
And finally, we just wanted to leave you with some very specific resources. We have local and national resources around some of this, both relationship violence and human trafficking, both sex trafficking and labor trafficking. And so this slide will also be this information on this slide will also be shared out with you by Christine, so that you can have those as well. But we really have, I just want to highlight some really great places that we have that are ready and willing to support you. And just knowing as parents that we do not walk along alone, and that there are so many places that can walk alongside you through your questions and supporting your students. So thank you.
And that leads us right into our Q&A portion. And throughout the event, there have been a couple questions just about resources. And as Megan just shared, Eventbrite will be sharing additional resources when the event closes. So please watch out for those in your inbox. And if you have personal questions or things about experiences that you have had, please use those resources that we are sharing with you so that you can connect with those outside resources. I have one question. It says, do you know who is in charge of the grant there? So I'm not sure what I know. Were you talking about maybe Megan? Is this one for you?
Yes, so we've been working, we're working with different staff within each building. So we've been communicating with superintendents. Obviously, this is a decision that districts need to take the lead on and then kind of trickle it down. So working with some of the health teachers, some of the KSSN staff, and the assistant superintendent as well. But if you have more specific questions, I'm happy to chat with you too about getting things happening as well.
And then another question about, is this webinar going to be recorded? It is being recorded and it will be uploaded to the Forest Hills website. We have to go through a closed captioning program to make sure that is ADA compliant. But as soon as that is done, we will upload that to our website for you guys to be able to view that as well. And that looks like that is the conclusion of our questions. So I do want to very much thank all of you panelists for joining us tonight and taking your time to share with us your expertise and knowledge. We also want to thank the district and the foundation for always supporting our efforts and events. Our next event is going to be Wednesday, March 23. It is going to be an in-person event. This was our second virtual, but we are going to go back to in-person, hopefully. And currently it is going to be at the Fine Arts Center. The topic is going to be substance trends and use and what parents should know. And we will be doing our tickets through the Eventbrite program as we have done for the first couple events. Tonight, we will be sharing a survey with you, and we very much appreciate your feedback on the presentation as well as the content. So through Eventbrite, you will be receiving a survey as well as additional resources. And that brings us to the conclusion. Oh, wait, it looks like maybe we have. Oh, no, there's just a thank you. Thank you guys so much for taking your time. I so appreciate your participation, and thank you everyone for joining us and taking your time this evening. Have a wonderful night. Bye, everyone.